All right. We're back in the Atlanta studios here. Rich Casanova at Global Podcast Studios headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. If you've ever been down this way, stop by. But speaking of stopping by, we have the Mr. Dewayne Hart in the studio. Everything cybersecurity. He's literally written the book on the topic. He has a long-standing podcast going into season 2, I believe it is, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's for the podcast. And you've added another element, which we just did a taping here in the studio, a live stream on YouTube.
Yes.
And that's getting some great traction on that end. But back here in the studio, so what's interesting about this podcast and this episode is talk about timing. It is the official month, drum roll please, for Cybersecurity Month.
Yes,
right?
It is. It is time.
And the little bit of the backstory, I've heard about it. I didn't realize the backstory. This was actually created in 2004. The President of the United States and Congress declared October to be Cybersecurity Awareness Month. That's been going on now 18 years in the making. And so let's jump right into it. Got a lot of questions on this, the topic of the month. So first of all, what do you think that in your mind, I mean, you're the subject matter expert on this. What's the purpose of Cybersecurity Awareness Month?
Well, it's not for people to run and hide. That much for sure. Okay.
All right.
You know.
Why you look at me when you say that? Yeah.
It's that in this society, we actually have these cybersecurity fears that are going on, right? Mm-hmm. Where people are very afraid of cybersecurity for some odd reason.
Right.
And cybersecurity is a shield that serves to protect our lives, information, and data.
Right.
So with that said, Cybersecurity Awareness Month has its pluses. And, the pluses to Cybersecurity Awareness Month is so that people can engage and understand how to use cybersecurity.
Okay.
This is the time to sit back and take an evaluation
right.
of yourself and your engagement, or if you own a corporation, what are some of the things you need to do to improve your cybersecurity programs? Also, too, taking a deep view into a security state, because the month of October for cybersecurity awareness has always been focused on users.
Right.
Users.
Yeah.
But now there needs to be a deep view into the security state of a company, so that you can take a view and say, are we really practicing cybersecurity as we should?
Right.
Or are we just getting by? Changes happen, and corporations have to address changes too, because with cybersecurity is constantly changing. There's all kind of different critical issues that are happening. So it's a time to focus.
Yeah.
And to learn.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's something that should be, you talk a lot, throughout the year, there's different things to do. But it's like, your New Year's resolutions, you kind of reevaluate what you did the last year. In business, you look at your, quarterly reports and evaluate and decide what actions need to be maintained or changed. And speaking of changes, I was thinking about much like, when the at least in the U.S., when we have our time change, it sends a signal to say, as a reminder to change your battery in your smoke alarm. So much like cybersecurity, when this rolls around, it's like, let's take a step back and reevaluate. What did we do right last year in cybersecurity in terms of our organization? What new things do we need to tackle? Right? Would that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense, but it requires an organization to have some actionable data and to collect metrics, and to use those metrics as a development platform, I may add, because those metrics are designed so that the organization can see where their security readiness stands. And with the security readiness, it focuses beyond users, but also looking at your technologies, looking at your vendors, looking at your business process, looking at how you invest into cybersecurity, and also, too, coming up with a plan for your future state. Where do you want to carry cybersecurity for that next year?
Well, let's talk about what are some activities that organizations should occur during October.
Training.
Okay.
Training, train, and train. Training can be formal or it can be informal. Formal is, let's sit down in a classroom and talk about cybersecurity. Or it can be informal, where you start to have larger discussions. And part of those discussions falls into a team involvement. Is to look at your different technology teams and also looking at the different non-technology teams and branching those two together and starting having a conversation about the previous year.
Right.
And where do you want to vehicle cybersecurity for the next year?
Yeah, because a lot of times we think that just lays on the shoulder of the IT department, but anybody in your organization that is connected to the internet, right? Start there.
Yes.
They need to be involved, and they need to. And you mentioned about learning, so it's again kind of learning from what we did and learning about. There's always new developments, right? So the operative word there is awareness.
Yes, it is, because of the growth mindset. You'll continue to develop.
So, what are some things people should be aware of? What would be on your short list?
Well, I think that people should be aware of some of the things that affect their environment.
Okay.
If you look at some of the environments, you want to look and try to think about how incidents happens. You want to look and see whether all your employees are engaged into cyber security.
Have that mindset.
Yes. All right. You also want to look and see whether there's complacency in place, because complacency is very important, because if an organization has a group of users that are complacent, then that's a risk.
Yeah,
it's
their
going
guards
to cause
down.
a lot of problems. Even if you have phishing attacks and so forth and people are complacent, they are serving as a sweet spot for phishing attacks to occur. One of the other things I always like to talk about is that you want to make sure that you have a continuous engagement. So that means everybody has to be involved.
Right.
You want to be able to address cybersecurity from the front line and have a proactive environment built, because you don't want to have more of an reactive environment.
Right.
Because reactive means that we are in emergency mode and we're fighting from the rear.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like I mentioned at the top of the show about the New Year's resolution. A lot of people have fitness in mind, right? So you can't just go to the gym in January and be set for the year, right? No, so in cybersecurity, you can't just be like, well, we checked that off our list last year. Right?
No, you can't do that.
Right. So let's. So when you put these individuals, your employees, and in a room for training, you mentioned earlier, what are some of the discussions that should be on the short list that are most critical for cybersecurity awareness?
Wow. The traditional way has been talk about passwords, social engineering. Talk about the type of things that are used to protect information assets and the person.
Right.
I like to take it to another level.
All right. Let's do it.
Okay.
Here we go. You better strap in if you're listening to this in your car or whatever. Hold on. Taking it to another level. Go on, Dewayne.
Okay. Organizations should do this. Where's your cybersecurity mindset?
Right.
Okay. Organization can take my book and pick a chapter out of there.
And we're going to talk about 5 chapters that are relevant to this.
Right.
But when they put them in a room, we have a note here about ransomware is probably top of the list, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And you put people in a room.
Right.
And really, really what you're trying to do is to have an open discussion. But you want to make sure that they understand the purpose of having a cybersecurity mindset, because if you put them in a room and allow an open type of discussion, and if you evaluate your team and trying to see where they focus, trying to see where their weakness is at, and seeing what their overall knowledge is about, because anybody can go to a computer and sit there and listen to a video for 15 minutes and just keep going through the PowerPoint slides.
Right.
But in a learning environment, you want to see how well people can engage into cybersecurity. So when they're learning how to engage into cybersecurity, this is where ransomware comes up.
Right.
Okay. Do they know what ransomware is? Do they know that when you get these attachments that that you need to evaluate those attachments. You cannot just punch the attachment because a ransomware may just load. Even so, looking at some of the other critical things like your critical infrastructure, right?
Right.
You know, you want to have that discussion because if the country infrastructure goes down, you know, you won't have wireless communications.
Right.
You know, the water plants are offline, and things such as the utility plants as well too. You know, you don't have power. See, those things are very important as well too. And looking at your suppliers, because as I said before,
because those can change throughout the year. We onboarded some people, you know, 3 months ago, but let's take a step back and see where they fit in the mix. When
you look at that deep security state, what you're looking at is your environment from a 360 degrees of security visibility, right?
Right.
You want to look at all the different intricate pieces that fall under your organization, and your suppliers is one, because you engage them, because you have to have that discussion. Because if you don't, people will assume that every supplier is honest, or they're transparency.
Or you may have changed suppliers during the year, and this is a chance to take a look back and say, okay, last year we had these 10 suppliers. We replaced 3 of them. We need to kind of take a closer look at those, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you take a look and see where your weak points were.
Right.
How did you fail with those suppliers? How did you succeed?
Right.
Looking at your service level agreements that you have in place. All right. Looking at your operation level agreements and your privacy level agreements that you have in place, and seeing what they effective. Because cyber awareness, and I'm going to restate this, it goes beyond the typical user-based security, making sure you protect your passwords, making sure you don't share your passwords. We have to expand cyber awareness.
Right. And we've been talking a lot about companies, organizations. And by the way, Rich Casanova here alongside Dewayne Hart. We're listening to an interview with the man that wrote the book on cybersecurity, and as well as a podcast. So before we jump into the next topic, pivoting from companies to individuals and like parents and so forth, if this isn't of interest to you, intriguing, you can reach out to Dewayne. Just go to DewayneHart.com. You can find his book there, his podcast links, everything you need to know about cybersecurity just at DewayneHart.com. Okay, so Dewayne, let's talk about, we talk about companies. I remember you had this aha moment a number back, I think in season 1, about parents and cybersecurity. What was the phrase you came up with there, and talk to us about that?
Digital parenting?
Yeah.
Here's why cyber awareness is so important. If you're a parent, I want you to put your coffee down.
Right.
I want you to listen to me for a second.
Right.
There are potential risks for the youth.
Right.
On Snapchat and use of cell phones, use of tablets, PCs, PlayStation games.
TikToks and everything else.
TikTok and all these accounts. You have to know who your youth are communicating with, and you have to become a digital parent.
Right.
Digital parenting in the Cyber Awareness Month, and me as the chief of cybersecurity.
Exactly.
Here's kind of what I want all digital parents to do. I want you to focus beyond just cutting the cell phones off at 10 at night. All right. Because that's a large discussion about, as a digital parent, you just cut the cell phones off. No, you need to be involved with the PlayStation games. See how they operate. Who are the friends in that network? Snapchat and different type of friends they may have. Learn about parental controls, because you have your parental controls on your smart TVs, especially on Netflix. All right. But you need to have parental controls established on your smartphones, on your laptops, your tablets, because now the youth are probably taking classes from home.
Right. Yeah, some of that's needed, right, for our current school system. Boy, you just hit on something. We should do later down the road a whole episode just on gaming and cybersecurity and Twitch, and that's a whole, whole other topic. But speaking of, digital parenting, Cyber Monday rolls around this time of year coming up, right? And it's the holiday shopping. And so you have a lot of employees that are online, shopping, which they probably shouldn't have. And then there's deals that are, it just goes in kind of warp speed. So they see these great, 50% off deals. And it's very enticing to jump on that without much awareness of, what's going to be the repercussions of that. And it is October, so although we shouldn't be scared about it, right? But it is Halloween. I don't know if they did that intentional, right? Building cybersecurity around the scariest month of the year being Halloween, but
Rich, I stated before, the purpose of this podcast is to remove the cybersecurity fears.
Exactly, yeah. Right, exactly, yeah. But be prepared. I mean, much like we've had some storms recently, right? Things are going to happen in life, whether it's an online storm, so to speak, in terms of cybersecurity, or a man-made or a storm otherwise, right? Criminal activity or nature-based storm. It's about like when the hurricane's coming at you or the tornado, people board up their windows and so forth and leave town. But sometimes we don't connect that with online, issues.
You know why? Why did people have a disconnection between online and regular life?
Right.
It's because when they think about safety, people are more focused on the physical form of safety.
Right.
Digital safety is about cybersecurity.
Right.
All right. It is about beyond passwords, because with safety, human beings are focused on what can they visually see.
Right.
Cybersecurity, you can't visually see.
Right.
Okay, because it's digital.
Right.
So that means you have to get into the roots of digging down and search for information and find passwords and so forth.
Right.
Now being a digital parent, and the chief of cybersecurity is going to give you some orders for this month.
Right.
Now I'm going to go put on my military uniform. Okay. All right. And digital parents out there, please go do your homework. Please go listen to the previous podcast that I have presented, because as a digital parent, it is very important that you understand cybersecurity.
Absolutely. And speaking of previous content, we're going to talk now about some chapters in your book very pertinent to this. But you mentioned passwords a number of times throughout the podcast so far. And I made a note here just, that came to my mind is what's the three most important things in real estate is what?
Real estate.
Location. In cybersecurity, it should be password.
Yes.
Right? Because that's, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's in many cases the entry point.
Yeah.
Right? If they don't have your password, they're not going to be able to gain access to your data in many cases.
Yes.
Right?
So
password.
Password, because you're trying to make sure that the bubble stays protected, because the people that try to unlawfully gain access, they wanted to penetrate that bubble. And around that bubble is cybersecurity and the shield.
Right.
And you have to protect that information. So what they're trying to do is to defeat everything that you are supposed to be doing.
Retro.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, much like the financial industry, your ATM card is all based on your PIN. If they don't have access to your PIN, it's kind of useless to plug in the machine if you don't have that password, that PIN. Okay, so let's move on before we run out of time here. So speaking of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, aligning with your book, there are specifically 5 chapters that address this. So let's kind of do rapid fire. So first comes up Chapter 4. Talk to us about the connection with Chapter 4 in Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
Chapter 4 is about everything I have already discussed. Okay.
All right, so Chapter 16. Let's go to Chapter 16 then. The value proposition.
Value proposition means that what type of service can you provide to your company? Because if you're cybersecurity focused, then it makes it easy for your company and they can save money from these attacks.
Okay, Chapter 17, digital monetization.
Technology changes. Technology is changing so much every day, and organizations have to invest into technology. And part of your cyber awareness is to understand your security state, because over the past year, if you kept metrics and trends and data, you know that you need to modernize your environment.
Right.
And part of that Modernization comes from your cybersecurity awareness programs that you have in place.
Okay, chapter 18.
Workforce modernization is about training.
Yeah, kind of what we talked about at the top of the podcast. Yeah.
Yes, training.
Right. So it can't just be like, again, your IT department or the owner of the company or somebody at the C-level suite, right? Mm-hmm. It has to be that hacker's mindset or hacker's hat throughout the entire organization. Speaking of, that's my popular chapter is chapter 19.
Yeah.
Is hacker's hat.
It's simple. Okay. If you want to raise your awareness, you as a person has to be thinking like a hacker does.
Right.
Okay. Part of that whole entire picture
right.
is to make sure that your cybersecurity mindset is constantly operating, constantly moving, because you have that cyber focused attitude. This is simple talk.
Okay.
A cyber focused attitude equals a strong cyber awareness program, right? And in order to get all of that, think about your mindset that needs to be in place, all right? And I'll say that over and over again as the Chief of Cybersecurity. It's Cyber Awareness Month. I'm charging everybody to study all the digital parents. Please go out there and do your homework and start to protect the youth.
Okay, and kind of, recap, but we have some new topics here too. We have a list of 4 call to actions, right? So I think the first one is awesome, that I don't know if you have this phrase or where this comes from, but the concept of before you click, right? Uh-oh. So I think that's a great, area. It's much like, before you, when you start the car, right? Mm-hmm. We've all been through driving education school, right? So they teach you a list of get in the car, check your mirrors, adjust your mirrors and so forth. Put it in park, start the car, and that's an entire checklist. So before we click, online, we got to think about a checklist. What do we do? What's the protocol? But much like the car analogy, we now kind of do that on autopilot, right? We don't have to overthink it, but it has to be trained from the focus. So I like that first one, before you click. Any other thoughts on that one?
Rich, you are wearing your hacker's hat today. I'm going to still stay over here, man, and say you're doing it.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, I've learned from the best. So number 2 of this 4 checklist here would be talks about updating your software.
Very important, updating your software. This is part of knowing that software gets old and there are vulnerabilities on your systems. Stay active on updating software. It's just straightforward. This is one of the ways where hackers try to penetrate the bubble if you have outdated software on your systems as well. Be smart about that. It doesn't take but a couple seconds to say yes.
Right.
And your Windows 11 desktop machine will execute on its own.
Wow.
All you have to do is to authorize the update.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. And number 3, we talked a lot about passwords, but talk to us about, creating what's an ideal password? What are some elements that kind of rule of thumb of creating a password that is less likely to be hacked? What are some guidelines of, when you create a password?
Okay. A combination of letters, characters is a strong password.
Okay.
I would say that if someone wants to create a 16-character or a 17-character password, it's probably safer.
Okay.
For a 4-character password, it's not safe because maybe it's so it sounds perfect.
Right. It's easy to remember.
It's easy to remember.
This seems somewhat a recent phenomenon when I'm creating new accounts for new widgets online or services. I'll use one of my standard passwords. I'm not going to share right now, but they'll say this is too common of a password. Even if I've never used it on their platform before, they say that's too common, right? And another rule of thumb is, if I guess a good website would give you the instructions of don't use a password that's also contained like in your username or your email,
Right. Here goes the.
I mean, it seems maybe common to you, but share those words of wisdom with our listeners.
Here goes the science behind a password.
Okay.
A password should come with special character numbers and symbols. A password system, well, most of the online system will go and tell you that it has to be a minimum of 8, 12, 14, or 16 characters, right? So when it tells you the minimum, this is exactly what you need to follow. If it's a minimum of 12, well, you can have 16 characters.
Right.
You can have 17 characters. I do not recommend using a password generator online because everybody else uses that as well, too.
Right.
If you are a person that cannot remember a password, you write down on a sheet of paper, hide it, and lock it somewhere, and you lock it up.
Okay.
Right? If you lock it up in your closet in a shoebox,
right,
nobody can use the internet to go get that password because it's not on a system anywhere.
Yeah.
So you have to have that kind of mindset in place. One of the other things, too, is to just change your password on a random basis, maybe like every 90 days or so.
Mm-hmm. Almost set like a lot of things I do like that is I'll set a Google reminder on my Google Calendar. Just comes up, it's time to, again, go back to changing your batteries in your smoke alarm, right? Those aren't going to last indefinitely, right? And if they're not updated, like your software, your smoke alarm is not going to work when the fire kicks in, right? So last item on our 4 list, and see if you have any other closing thoughts, but talk to us about MFA.
Uh-oh. Multi-factor authentication.
It sounded like
with the lights.
Sound a little scary. Yeah, here we go.
Let me just make it simple.
Okay. You. Please.
Okay. Username and password. And something else like a token, right, that you add.
What do you mean by a token?
A token is a device that has a certain digits or number on there. Okay. And most of the organization will go have you to put in a username and password, but then after that you got to put a token in.
Right.
Okay.
That they supply to your email address.
Right.
Another layer of security, which as a user is a little bit of a pain or a hassle, but it probably makes you feel more secure, right?
Yeah. When
it's a small inconvenience for the big picture prize.
Yes. When you put your username and password in, then after that you get an email with the code, and you put the code in.
Right.
Yeah. You can use a Hart token as well too, which is by companies like RSA, which actually have those codes on a little piece of device. And it changes rapidly for you as well too. Most of the large organizations will go have MFA, and most of the websites, banks, and everywhere else is pretty much following the same standard now. You just kind of make sure that you enable that.
Oh, up row. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Make sure that you enable this. All my digital parents out there, listen to me as the Chief of Cybersecurity. Make sure that you enable this. And I'm going to keep talking about digital parenting because it's such a critical issue. Do you not know that when I went on LinkedIn and I posted my live stream for digital parenting, I had someone that was involved with one of the federal agencies that was doing a study on this topic.
Oh, wow.
And told me that this was well written here because he was working on his doctorate program.
Wow. And
said that it was a great topic to go have. He said he's been arguing about this for like years.
Right.
And maybe later on in the podcast session, I should find out who this person is and see if I can get him on a live stream because this would be very important, especially with digital parent.
And maybe during the holidays would be great too because people sometimes let down their guard when they're out shopping or they're overextended, and they're traveling with family and friends and so forth. But I think the digital parenting is a very important topic. To do a little deeper dive in another episode, right? But what's interesting about, again, the Halloween analogy being October and Cybersecurity Month is when you send your kids out trick-or-treating, it's not like everything goes, right? You want them to have fun, just like, but you want to, keep your guard on, what's happening when they're out trick-or-treating. Keep them safe because they're in costumes and, you don't want them wandering out in the street and getting, even just, tripping and getting a bump on their knee or whatever, right? Something small to major. and back to like the online. There's amazing things kids can learn from education. It opens up a world of opportunity and education, right, around the world. And in the past, that wasn't available to them, right? But you just got to be
mindful.
Mindful, exactly.
Mindful. What is really word. Going on? Yep. You just have to stay engaged. You stay active. And
stay tuned to this episode.
Right. And you stay tuned to this episode here and just realize that cybersecurity is a changing environment. Activate your cybersecurity mindset and be smart in what you do. All digital parenting, the chief of cybersecurity is holding you responsible. I am going to keep on saying this, and you know who you are.
Right, exactly, yeah. We're not mentioning any names, but yeah. Okay, Dewayne, it was a pleasure having you back in the studio, and we actually have at least one more episode coming up this month for October in Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but this was a great springboard to launch off the month and the celebration of this and awareness. So, again, visit DewayneHart.com for all things you can purchase his book from there, listen to previous podcast episodes, link to his YouTube for his live stream, even some Q&A. If you have some questions, you can reach out to the man of the hour, Dewayne Hart. So we'll see you next time on this episode and on the internet. Be safe.
I can't wait.